my Q&A video this week. The questions I'm going to talk about in this video are on solid body guitars in jazz and also about using overdrive pedals in jazz. I'm going to talk about how to learn stuff from licks and how to use licks and incorporate them in your playing without sounding like you're copy-pasting stuff from other people's solos. I'm going to explain how you play an artificial harmonic, and I'm going to go over, or at least give some advice on how you can make some intros to standards. So some things that you can use when you're playing a gig, a session where you didn't rehearse, or if you're trying to write an arrangement, and some of the stuff you can think about when you're trying to come up with an intro. At least some of the stuff that I think about is what I'm going to go over. Then I'm also going to talk a little bit about how you keep the form as a beginning jazz improviser. So how do you work on staying with the music and keeping track of where you are. If you have a question, then leave a comment on this video or send me a message on Facebook or Instagram. I think it's really fun to make these videos because through these questions I sometimes have to think about things, problems from another point of view, and I actually learn something from that, and that's quite refreshing. And another thing that you should also do is that if you're interested in some of the stuff that I'm talking about in these videos, then check the comments of the video, because very often there are people contributing with their comments that actually have something to say and have some experiences. If you want to help me keep making these Q&A videos and all the lessons that I'm making, then one thing you can do is of course to like this video on YouTube, and you can also subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed. And another way you can directly help me is of course also check out my web store and see if there's something there you find useful. In that way you're helping me get more time to make the videos. Then I have another question also, because the last few weeks I published a few backing tracks on YouTube, and I'm curious if you guys find that interesting. Is that something that you want to use? Are there things that you're looking for specifically in the backing tracks, or things I should do differently, or other suggestions? So leave a comment on that, and let's just get started with the questions. So I'm new to jazz improv. I have a problem playing through the progression. I get lost easily. Can you help me? This is an extremely common problem if you're beginning with jazz, because you have to keep track of the chords, you have to keep track of the scales and the arpeggios and think about what you want to play, and you also have to know where you are and just feel the time and know which beat of the bar you're on and stuff like that. And that's just normal, that when you have to do all of that in the beginning, you get lost. I remember getting lost really a lot in the beginning when I was trying to play jazz and just started, and I see it a lot in students as well. So how do you deal with it? There are a few things that you can do. So what you want to do is you want to actually practice so that you're going to build a foundation where you sort of get a sense of time that you can kind of lean on. So you don't have to think about what beat you're on, and you don't have to think about where you are. You just kind of know, and you just follow along with what is flowing in the time. If everybody's playing clearly, you know what's going on. And there are a few things you want to sort of work on with that, I think, if you want to do that. So the first thing would be that start by just learning one or two songs. Keep it really simple so that you make sure that the first songs you're learning, and I'm sort of assuming that this is about standards. I would at least suggest you learn standards, just so that it's something that's easier to hear and also closer to a lot of other songs that you probably will have to learn if you want to learn how to play jazz. So learn one or two songs, and that means you need to know the melody by heart, and you need to know the chords by heart, and you need to be able to play them, so both the melody and the chords, without any problems, in time, with a metronome, and without having to sort of stop or think or hesitate and stuff. So it has to be easy. That's how well you need to know it, and it's something that you need to spend some time doing, and it takes long to really get the melody that strong and get the chords that strong, but it's time well spent for sure. So you want to start with working on that, and then of course you need to improvise as well, and that's tricky. So I think in terms of first building, you want to build a sense of how long each chord is, and you want to also practice towards actually playing something that's helping your ear confirm where you are, so that you're playing something that's so clear that you can easily hear and that you know that it's right. And in that way you're sort of building both your ears and your sense of time and your sense of period, so that you really feel how long the bar is, and that you don't per accident play 10 8 notes in an 8-note line and turn around the beat and stuff like that, which is what usually happens in cases like this. So to learn that, let's take if we take the beginning of the song Tune Up. That's sort of an easy tune to do. So the beginning of Tune Up is just the 2-5-1 in the key of D. So D major, and so the chords are these, and that's not such a big problem to play, hopefully. And then some of the exercise you can do. Well, I think the exercise that I would suggest you start by is if you know your arpeggios, you kind of do need to know your arpeggios, because that's also what you're going to help. It's going to help you build up the idea that you can hear what's going on and hear in your own playing where you are. So if you play the arpeggios over this, so let's just say that I'm playing just a 1-octave version of the arpeggios in 8 notes over this progression, then that would be something like this. So that's quite simple, it's just playing each arpeggio twice. But when I'm doing this, I'm already beginning to sort of tell my ear, like I'm keeping time, and I'm telling my ear this chord, and also just my sense of period and my brain, that this chord is this long, and then it changes to this chord. And in that way we're sort of connecting what I'm playing with the song. So we're really using the fact that we can hear the song, that we know the melody, and then that we play the chords as arpeggios here to sort of tell us, like, okay, when we hear this, when I'm hearing this melody in my head, this is the chord that's under it. The easiest way to work with these chords, I think, is because now this is a song in D major at this point, and that would be sort of this scale. And then if you learn the arpeggios as diatonic arpeggios just in the scale, so like this, so just playing like 7th note, no, not 7th note, 4-note 7th chord arpeggios in this position, then and then of course you need to know which arpeggio you're playing when, and then you can pretty much take that through any song in the key of D, or you can move it around playing other keys. So that's the first thing you need to do. Then the next thing you need to do, if you can do this, is to start working on improvising and making lines so that it's very clear in the lines where you are. So you're practicing making lines that sort of clearly hit the one of each new chord with a note that's very clear, so that clearly in that chord, so that you can hear in the melody that you're improvising that the chords are changing and which chord is coming. And I already made like a lesson on how to use target notes, because that's kind of what I would suggest you do with this on a 2-5-1, which is pretty much what we're going to be doing now. So I'll link to that in the description of this video. But just to sort of cover it quickly, so if I take the third of each chord as a target note, so the G on the E minor, the C sharp on the A7, and the F sharp on the D major. And then I think you can already hear, like, if I just play the bass note and the third one, and then you need to kind of hear the rest of the harmony from these notes. And then you try to make lines that work with this, and in the beginning you probably need to do it rubato, and at least keep it slow so you have an overview, and then really make sure that, okay, it's not, right now we're playing on the E minor, so it's not so important that we start on the G, but it's very important that we hit the C sharp on the 1 there, on the A, and the F sharp on the D. So if I try that, that could be something like... another round. So that last one I'm just starting to move stuff around in octaves, but the idea is the same. And if you play like that, you can, your ear, you know it's right, and you are sort of also, because you have the target notes already, you're kind of already making lines that you know where the heavy points of the lines are, and that's going to help you hear when the chords are changing, and that's going to help you also just if you're playing 8 notes lines continuously, or at least playing something that's like rhythmically quite simple. It's going to help you build that period so that you really feel like, okay, a bar is this long, and 4 bars is this long, and 2 bars is this long, and you do that by actually playing something that you know is really clearly showing that, and that you can really hear it, and that's kind of how you work on it. And that worked really well for me, and it's also something I see work well for some of my students. So I would suggest try that, and you can always ask me again if you think that this is not working, or if it is working, what's the next step. Hi Jens, any thoughts on kinds of full body electrics that are best for jazz? I'm a Telecaster fanboy and love the single coil sound, but often I struggle to find the right kind of boost or clean overdrive type pedal just to give the solos more definition. Would love to hear your thoughts on sound. Thanks. So I thought it would be fitting to just use this guitar now that I'm answering questions on single coils. So this is actually the Stratocaster that I played when I was accepted to when I did my entrance exam to the conservatory. At the time I had 13 strings on it, and now I changed them to 11s because I use it for more pop gigs and teaching other things. So I don't actually use this guitar for jazz very often. I don't know, I think I kind of found, at the moment at least, what I prefer with the semi-hollows and the humbuckers. So that's the kind of sound that I like a lot. But I do see that a lot of people are actually starting to use solid bodies. It's becoming quite common in jazz also, and especially the Telecaster. I think that's probably the most common one that's coming on. A few people are also using Stratocasters. It's a little bit less, and also the occasional Les Paul is being used. Which I think is weird, because for me, I think if I had to choose something, I would probably go for a Les Paul. I think that would be closer to, but that's also because a Les Paul and a semi-hollow like an ES335 type guitar, they're anyway really, really similar. And I was also sort of experimenting with that when I got the Yamaha guitar, thinking about if it was possible for me to just go to a solid body guitar. I think mostly thinking about flying and traveling, but also just in general, like, what does that offer? I don't have a Telecaster, so I can't really say too much about it. So it could also be that some of the stuff about the overdrive pedals is not completely accurate, because a Strat and a Telecaster are not the same guitar. Some of the humbuckers, some of the pickups are actually very different, even though they're both single coils. It's like you wouldn't really compare like a P90, which is also a single coil pickup, with a Strat pickup. They sound very, very different. But at the same time, I think there are a lot of things that you can say about it. So I think it's becoming more and more common to use the solid body guitars, and it's very practical also. So I don't really see any reason not to. For me, I still miss sort of in terms of clean sound. This is a certain clean sound, and it's not really what I need for when I play jazz, I find. I could of course maybe use some heavier strings and get a different kind of sound, but I think at least I would probably need like humbugging pickups to get this kind of sound that I want, the sort of sustain wise and just general the compression of it, because single coils compress a lot less and are more open and a little bit more dynamic, but I actually like the sort of the feel of the humbucker. If it's not, I don't like them to be over compressed, of course, but so the PAF type humbuckers are generally not that compressed. So yeah, so that's my thoughts on solid bodies for jazz guitar. It's not really something that I thought like really long over in general, or ever. I mean, it's what everybody makes of it. Some of my favorite players, like Bill Frisell, use a lot of time a solid body guitar. So it's a good thing to do. I think that's fine to do. And also, especially like Jakob Bro uses a Telecaster most of the time. And who else? Nia Felder is using one. I think Gillard is using a Tele also on some tracks on his new album. So yeah, so it's becoming really common, and that's fine. I think it's nice that jazz is, in terms of sound on guitar, is opening up a bit, because it used to be really sort of really like a jazz guitar sound was like an archtop through a Fender type amp with the treble turned down and not too much reverb. And that's of course nice, you have a certain sound and you can get a great sound out of that. But I like the variation actually also. I like the idea that you get all sorts of different sounds and you don't only have to stick to one. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on sound. So yeah. And then the overdrive thing, because I think it is interesting, this thing with using an overdrive pedal to get more definition in your solos and just to use that as part of your setup. I think it was a few Q&As ago I showed a picture of my signal chain in my X8, and there's almost always an overdrive pedal in there when I do that, even with also with my semi-hollows. And the reason why I do that is to get a mid boost, and sometimes also a little bit of low cut actually. So and I think that is the kind of overdrive pedal you're probably looking for. I think you need to go figure out sort of what kind of tube screamer clone you want, and then you want to use the tube screamer to just push the amp a bit. And also, oh yeah, you have to be careful that you actually have an amp that can take pedals well, because that's not, in my experience, that's not really the case for all solid state amps for sure. But so for a tube amp, it will work really well probably. But yeah, so keep that in mind as well. But in general, so you want to have something, if you want to have more definition in your solos, guitar exists in the mids. So if you want more clarity and you want to stick out a little bit more, then it's about mids and it's about high frequencies a bit, but mostly it's just about boosting the mids, I think. I think if you listen to my sound, especially when I'm playing with the semi-hollow, with my Ibanez, you can hear that I do that so much that my sound is almost a little bit nasal. But that's because I find that it might not be the most beautiful sound if I'm playing all by myself, but in a band context it works really well. And it also, when I'm cutting a lot of lows, I'm not getting in the way of the double bass player, which for jazz is really useful. The double bass is horrible in terms of sort of being boomy and low, and also it's an instrument that you easily drown out, and that's also a pity. And then you can hear what the bass player is playing, and it's also very often the case that the bass player and the audience can't hear what the bass player is playing if you have a lot of lows in your sound. So that's one reason why you probably on your amp want to turn down the bass quite often, and again depending on the amp. And then also why it's useful to have like a tube screamer, because what a tube screamer does is that it cuts off the lows of your sound. So maybe just to demonstrate, the way I have this set up is of course I have a Fender amp in my XFX here, and then this is the sound with, I forget actually which one, but it's one of the tube screamer clones that's in there. And if I turn it off, you get this sound. And there's not really, I mean, there is some volume difference, but the biggest difference is actually just that this guitar does not really have a lot of mids, and of course it's a Fender amp that does also not really have a ton of mids. So it's kind of just scooping out the body of the sound really. And then if I get the right one, so if I turn it back on, it's like, of course there is some volume difference, but I think the biggest part of the difference is really just like the frequency response of what I'm playing. And for a guitar like this, it really makes a huge difference whether you have that on or not, especially in a band setting. If you want to just stick out anyway in a band, then you want to do this. I have another one that's a little bit brighter, I think. I'm not sure. So that's a variation on the same kind of recipe in terms of overdrive, and I think it's probably such a small difference that you can't really hear it on YouTube unless I started recording myself. You kind of hear it there, I think, if I turn it off. But it's mostly that. I think that adds a bit more high frequency. So what you want to do with this is I would suggest you check out some Tube Screamer clones, different ones, and preferably you want to actually go to a store and check some stuff out or borrow some. And I think it is sort of the Tube Screamer thing you want to check out. And there are a million different variations on Tube Screamers, so that's not so difficult to find. And you can get them cheap. I have a Noble's Tube Screamer. It's not really a Tube Screamer, but it's very close to it. That works really well, and that's a fairly cheap pedal that some people really swear by also. Another thing you can do is also, if you want to just explore this more, is to check out, there's another YouTube channel called That Pedal Show, and they've done some videos on overdrive pedals. In general, there are two guys sitting around talking about effects and amps and guitars and how those things mix, and they love what they do, so their videos are really long, not unlike my Q&As. But it's good stuff, really. I mean, they know what they're talking about. They explain a lot of stuff, and they're especially good at talking about the different combinations. So why you want to use this type of overdrive or this type of delay for this type of guitar with this type of amp, and where do you want to place it and stuff like that. I find it very useful, and also just the fact that they really love what they're doing makes it really nice to watch. I'll see if I can find one of the videos where they actually talk about the overdrive pedals, because I found that really useful. That's also why I actually dare to say that it's like the Tube Screamer is the way to go for a single coil pickup, like a Telecaster. But I'll find a link and then I'll try and put that in the description. And they're anyway entertaining, so it's not a waste of time. Artificial harmonics. Tried learning for your last chords. What Alec is referring to in his question here, which is a little bit unclear, but still it's a question, is the fact that I publish licks on my Instagram account with some tablature in there, and one of them that I posted this week used some artificial harmonics, and he was asking what that was, because not everybody is familiar with that technique. So I guess I can quickly explain what that is. It's not so difficult. If you want to check out the Instagram link, then I'll link to that in the description as well. I do that once or twice a week. It's a little bit open how often I do it. So normally when we play a harmonic, so a natural harmonic, then we're just touching the string over the fret, and then I'm doing that with my left hand and I'm plugging it with my right hand. And that's sort of the stuff that we already know, but we can only do it for the open strings, because we can't like fret a note and then find the harmonic space and stuff like that, or at least it seems like we can't do that, but actually we can do that, because the idea is then, of course, if you put on a capo, then the fret where the harmonic is going to move with the capo, and you can kind of do the same thing. So if I was to, instead of using two hands, so one hand to touch the string and one hand to plug it, if I use the same hand to do both, so I'm touching with my index finger and plugging it with my middle finger, then I can play the note like that. And those are the artificial harmonics. And that I can of course do also not with the open string, but if I play like some sort of A minor pentatonic thing. So of course you can play the entire A minor pentatonic scale with this. You just need to get used to, like, you can also tell that I'm now looking at where I'm putting my right hand, and then I'm just playing the scale like that. So the idea is, take the note. I'm using the one that's 12 fret higher because that's the loudest. In theory, you could use the one that's 5 or 7 frets as well, but that gets tricky. So I would suggest at least starting just with 12 frets higher, and course, there are several ways of doing this, so you will also find people doing it like this. But I never really worked on it, so that's not how I do it. And of course, that is a little bit louder, actually. I don't know if you can tell on YouTube. But that's just what I have available. So you can do that with any type of scale, any kind of melody that you want to work with. You just need to get used to playing like that. That takes a little bit of time, at least it did for me. Another thing you can do is you can use it when you're playing chords. So I think the famous example is to do like these kind of harp-like ideas, which are nice, but also not all that practical all the time. It's like a special effect you can throw in some once in a while. Yeah, so those are sort of the basic ideas, and of course everything you do with that, like the good thing is about this is that you can also get to the point where you can actually like use bending notes with the or vibrato with a harmonic. So that's some of the things that I sometimes use it for also. And yeah, for the rest, that's artificial harmonics. One of the hardest things for me is actually incorporating the language I've picked up. For example, when using a lick from a transcription, how would you recommend incorporating it into your playing in a way that doesn't sound like, oh, here's that lick from my bag of tricks? I find myself often using language for the sake of language rather than actually being expressive. How can I break this habit? I guess I kind of talked about this question a few Q&As ago, maybe in a little bit of a different context, but I think it's just such an important subject, and also it's an interesting subject to talk about, that I'm just going to talk a little bit about it again. So if I'm repeating myself, then sorry about that. But yeah, so of course I transcribe stuff, and I've also done that when I was learning and when I was starting out playing jazz, and I think it's a good way to learn certain things. But it's true that for me also, I don't really think that you want to learn licks from your transcriptions, because it's always going to be like, oh yeah, that's the 2 bars of Pat Martino or the 2 bars of Schofield that you're going to put in your solo, and it's never really going to sit well, or at least it's going to be so much work to get it to sit well that you want to maybe work on it in a different way. So if you're playing along with the transcription and you're learning a whole solo, that's going to benefit your timing and your technique and your phrasing, and you're going to learn a lot of things. But if you want to learn repertoire, then you probably just want to think a little bit more about some other aspects of it. So maybe you want to take the lines a little bit more apart and look at really what is the essence of this, what is it that I really like about it, and then work on that. So it's kind of hard to give an example without having a real solo to take something from, but yes, I would like take a look at the line and then see if I can come up with what is the concept. Is it a specific, so you need to think about like, is it a specific rhythm that sounds great about this? Is it a specific type of arpeggio, or is it a combination of arpeggios, or is it passing notes, or all those sort of melodic devices that you can think of, and then see if you can sort of pinpoint what is it that I like about this, and then work on using that. And then if you take something out, then just practice making lines with it and using all the things that you already know, so that you're connecting the new thing, which is whether it's like an arpeggio or a chromatic passing note phrase, some sort of enclosure or something like this, with all the stuff that you already know, because that way you're going to get into your playing. So if you just sit down and just make lines with it, make 10 lines with whatever. So if let's take like a 2/5 in G, and well, a good example could be maybe using a B flat sus triad arpeggio over a D7 alto. So that sound on top of this, and so of course if you transcribe something, I think this would be something that maybe I would have transcribed from Mark Turner or Kurt Rosenthal. I think there's like a Mark Turner album where they play a lot of on top of all types of chords. So we have our 2-5-1, and then you just need to play some. So the first thing you need to figure out is like we are using this arpeggio, so we need to be able to play that. So if I have that arpeggio, the triad here, and then just try and make some different lines with it. So just make some A minor lines that you can connect into this. So so I'm just making up these 2-5-1 lines. Just trying to resolve them. And you can tell I'm going out of time because I'm really sort of exploring like, okay, well, from here, how do I resolve it? And then I can resolve, in this case, to the major 7. So that way of working means that you're connecting and you're taking sort of a device out of the lick that you like, and then you're trying to put that together with all the stuff that you already know. I think that way of working is at least for me, it's much more useful. And it's going to give me a lot more material that I can actually use in a way that sounds natural, because yeah, I think I can hear usually when people start sort of taking out sort of complete licks and trying to use them, and I don't really think that that's what you want to work on. I think you want to work on figuring out, and of course it can be really difficult to really pinpoint what is great about this lick, and but it also helps you if you then figure out that, well, actually what's great about this lick is the half minute that he spent building up to it, or the fact that this is the first time he plays an arpeggio and he was playing blues until now. Stuff like that, you might actually end up with those kind of conclusions, but that's okay. Then you know that, then you can actually work on doing that. So, like, see how it is not to play the changes for the first chorus, and then when you start playing the changes really clearly, what is the difference? So those kind of things you will also learn from it. If you try to figure out what is going on and you can pinpoint it like that, it's also a process to really learn how to do that. But I think you'll learn more from doing that. And then you of course need to be good at analyzing melodies also. So you need to get used to thinking, okay, well, what is the range? What is the rhythm? Which notes are on the beat? You know, all these kind of different things that are important to a melody like that. But in any, yeah, I think that's anyway stuff that is underestimated in the way we're thinking about jazz and the way we're learning. So this whole concept of learning really how to make melodies and think about how they're constructed and when they make sense and when they don't make sense, which there isn't really a lot of material on, to be honest. I think there are a few things you can learn from counterpoint, but there's also a lot of stuff that's not really that applicable, and there's a lot of stuff that we're allowed to do that you're not allowed to do in counterpoint. So that's not a direct reference to check out. And I think the best thing you can do is just to always wonder about something that you played, and then think about like whether it makes sense. And the same goes for the licks also. So that you really think about what is that's great about this. Why is this line great? And it can be a number of things, and it can even be, like I said, not even the line itself, but just what was before it or what comes after it. That's also a part of timing. It's also part of phrasing, but it's also a part of soloing. So if you realize that, and if you think about it like that, then you've really learned something, I'm sure. So yeah, that's the best I can do in terms of doing this, which is like, don't practice licks and don't try to play them. Try to take them and make them your own. Even though in some ways it's more difficult, but in other ways it's a more, you gain more from the one lick that you then have to spend longer on. That's at least my experience. How to come up with intros to real book standards, and outros for that matter. It's kind of cool to get a question from somebody who's a colleague, and also, as far as I know, lives about 10 kilometers from here. So thank you for that. So I'm taking it that this question is about how do you do this in the context where you're not really rehearsing, and it's not like a band with the same repertoire all the time, because it's real book standards, so you didn't have time to rehearse and you're just coming together and jamming. And when you make an intro, I think there are a few things you can think about, like how can you, what's the point of the intro? And one thing that I do really often is that I use the intro to set up the groove. So if you listen to, well, that's not a standard. If you listen to Top Dog, I'm actually doing it like that. But also if I was to set up the groove, so let's say that I wanted to play like sort of a Latin New Orleans Pontiana thing on Out of Nowhere. So then I might just start the song with like, and just vamp on that. And use that to just give the rhythm section a chance to sort of get used to what the groove sounds like and how it feels, and we can sort of actually just find each other and find a way to and I'm not always going to tell them what I want. Sometimes I'll tell them, but I mean, if it's just a jam session and you're opening or something like that, you might just play it and see what happens. It depends on who you're playing with and how well you trust them. And I like this way of doing it, and also it gives you like, it creates a certain tension, because they have to really pay attention to what's going on, and then you just have to be clear. Like now I was trying to be really clear, like really, okay, now we're starting the theme. That's the only thing you need to be aware of when you do an intro like that. And of course you can do it with a vamp as well, or whatever works as a sort of presentation of the groove. And in this case, the kind of thing you need to do with this is, though, I need to play the groove and I need to have the ability to solo a little bit, because or at least vary it, because if I'm just playing the same thing all the time, it gets, if they don't sort of join in and just also lay down a groove right away, then it can get really long and it can also fall apart. So that you need to be a little bit aware of, I guess. But you can still do it also just with like playing a Latin thing, or so yeah, so in that way you can also just keep the feel and then just set down some sort of Latin thing. That's all about like which grooves do you already know and which don't you know. Another thing you can do is, of course, just introduce the song. So that could be something like what will work. So in that way, you're just giving the idea, like, okay, now we're playing it. This is swing, and it's a little bit faster tempo than what I just did. But I'm just playing part of the theme, that's like the ending of the theme, to just go, okay, this is a song, and because it's the song, it's clear like what is going on, and now it's like, okay, we played the last part. This will work also if you're playing with a horn player. You can still do this type of intro, and you can do it alone. You can also just tell the bass player to play the last 8 or the last 4 or something like that. So that's also sort of a normal sort of useful intro to work with, I think. I use this a lot when I'm playing with vocalists also, just to have an idea about what's going on, and also for them, and that we can sort of, it's also a way of just setting up the song, I think, by playing it part of the melody as an intro, and then in that way preparing the theme itself. Of course you have other like standard intros as well, so you can of course build tension in different ways, and you can well, I mean, so one sort of really standard thing is to, of course, do the sharp 4 thing. So So in that case, it's like you start on the sharp 4, and then the progression that you're playing is like sharp 4 half diminished, 4 minor 6, some sort of 3, flat 3 diminished, 2, flat 2, major 7, or a dominant, and you play like a 1, and then maybe a dominant to go to the first chord. And it's one of those sort of standard intros, and you can also use it as an outro that everybody needs to kind of know, and if you do that, most of the time the bass player and the drummer will know what's going on, if they have experience. Of course, similarly, you can also just vamp around on a turnaround. So that's also something that, like, and of course how much you solo is going to be like who's playing, and so that's a normal one too. Another one that's also, you can build tension. You can do that in different ways. So I think when you're playing both the sharp 4 and the turnaround, and actually also the last 8, you're kind of setting up. It's more on the traditional part of the repertoire, and you're kind of setting up a certain sort of swing atmosphere, and also the song, and it works well for that. Another one is to use something like a pedal, which works well because it creates tension. So for let's see, so if we're using that for it sounds like that. One thing you can play around with, which works well, is to make a pedal that is less clear. You have to be careful if you're playing with a vocalist if you do that, but I know from experience. But for instance, now I'm doing, this is clearly like a pedal you would expect for us to go to major. And if I make a pedal that's more geared towards minor, so maybe like a then you get a little bit of a surprise, and you will get even more of a surprise if you do the other way around. So if you have a song in minor and you start with a pedal that's major, then that works really well. And but you have to stay on it a bit longer, and you have to watch out that you're not messing around with the people playing also, because they might not get that. If they're used to you doing that, then it's okay. So if I take, maybe just to demonstrate the other way around, if I take the song like How to Use the Ocean, so that's in C minor. So if I started off with a pedal, that would imply C major. So then the minor is much more effective and much more of a surprise, and that works really well. I think stuff like that can be fun to mess around with, but those are, yeah, as again, depends on who you're playing with when you do that, I think. So since I didn't make a list in advance, so we have like setting up the groove, introducing the song. Of course you can also just play part of the theme out of time, or use that and then set up the time. So you can also just play part of the theme and then go to a pedal, and combine these things. And we have the sharp 4 and a turnaround, and some pedal points. I think so. Those are the most common ones that I use, at least. And I like the ones with the with setting up the groove, mostly because that means that I can also just use different grooves. and you can make some variations on that. A problem, I think the thing with intros is also just that if you only use like a turnaround as an intro and everything that you play is medium swing, then all the songs pretty much sound the same and all your intros sound the same, and that's annoying. It's probably more annoying for the people playing than for the people listening, but it's not really optimal, obviously. So you want to think about that when you're playing. It can be a good idea if you're just jamming standards to just have many ways of playing everything, and maybe work on being flexible so that songs that are normally in 4 you can play in 3, and in that way sort of just experiment with that. At least that's also what I do often, if I can think of it. And I mean, if you're in the moment, then it can be hard to actually figure out what the next tune to be if you didn't think about it in advance. But yeah, so if you have different options, so if you can play that, if you know that this song will work well as a Ponciana or as a Bossa Nova, then use those things as well, because that's also a way to create variation. And then you have already with these 3 or 4 different intros and and some different grooves and some different tempos, you can make a really varied set that's not that difficult, I think. And then of course if you play a ballad, you can do some extended solo stuff in the beginning, or in the end actually, but I mean, do that and then pull the band in the turnaround, and there are options like this as well, for sure. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the topic, and some ideas. If other people, if I missed something, because this is a good subject for where people can join in on. If you have some good idea for an intro that I didn't talk about, then please let me know. If you can, I mean, you could of course make more variations on the pedal point that are pointing to minor when it's major or the other way around. In theory, you could actually make some stuff with like turnarounds that all of a sudden happen to go to something else. But then again, I think you're more in the stuff where you're really arranging songs and where you might need to warn the people you're playing with. So yeah, this is just some thoughts. I hope you can use them, and of course, if I left something out, let me know. That was some of my thoughts on these questions. If you have something that you can add to it, so your favorite overdrive pedal for jazz, or an intro I didn't think of, or a good exercise for keeping the form, then leave a comment on the video. That's really useful. I mean, I like to get input from you guys, and also some, maybe I'll learn something new. Obviously, I didn't think of everything myself, so please, if you have something to contribute, then do so in the comments. That's for everybody great, I think. If you have any questions, then you can of course leave a comment also, and you can also send me a message on Facebook or Instagram. Then maybe I can pick it up in a later Q&A video. If you want to support my videos, then like this video, and if you're not subscribed to my channel, then please subscribe to my channel, and you can of course also check out my web store. That's about it for this week. Oh yeah, one more thing actually, the backing tracks that I asked about in the beginning. So if you have some thoughts on the backing tracks, if there are songs you would like to see, if tempos, feel, I don't know what you have in mind, but any remarks, ideas are welcome, of course. I can't promise that I'll actually do it, but who knows. I'm at least happy to hear some thoughts on it. So if you have some ideas for the backing tracks and some opinions on it, leave a comment. Yeah, so that's about it for this week. Thank you for watching, and until next week.